Vivid verses.
The math on the new property didn't work. It wasn't a question of the mortgage rate or the property tax in that specific zip code, though 4.2% on a $1.2 million valuation is enough to make anyone look twice at their liquid assets. The issue was the projected return on investment. In any other contract, if the service provider consistently failed to meet the agreed-upon KPIs after every budget increase, you'd terminate the agreement. You wouldn't double the budget and hope the performance improved. That's how companies go bankrupt. It's how men end up 50, divorced, and living in a managed apartment complex while paying for a roof they aren't allowed to sleep under. I called Miller, the real estate attorney, at 8:15 a.m. on Tuesday. I told him to exercise the contingency clause. He asked if there was an issue with the inspection. I told him the inspection was fine, but the long-term viability of the asset had been compromised. He didn't ask for details. Miller gets paid by the hour to file paperwork, not to provide therapy. By 9 a.m., the earnest money was being processed for return to my primary checking account. Sophia didn't know yet. She was at the gym. Then she had a lunch scheduled with two women she'd met through the country club we joined last year. That club membership was a $4,000 annual buy-in, plus a $500 monthly minimum on food and beverage. Since joining, our shared meals there had totaled exactly 4. She spent the rest of her time there with the tennis committee. I sat in my home office and opened the file. It's a simple Excel sheet. I've been maintaining it for 36 months. I started it after we moved from the 1-bedroom in the city to the 3-bedroom townhouse in the suburbs. At the time, she told me the city was too loud, too cramped, and that the lack of a sanctuary was the reason our physical life had slowed to a crawl. She said she needed a garden and a soaking tub to feel like a woman again. I spent $200,000 on the down payment for that sanctuary. The data tells a different story. In the 1-bedroom, despite the noise, we averaged 2.8 sessions of intimacy per week. In the first 6 months of the townhouse, that number dropped to 1.2. By the end of the first year, it was 0.5. That's twice a month, usually on a Sunday morning if I hadn't made any noise while getting coffee. I factored in variables. Stress at her job. Though I'd been covering 90% of the household expenses since year 2, allowing her to transition to consulting, which mostly meant curated Instagram posts about interior design. Health. Her biometric data from her watch, which I have access to for insurance purposes, showed her resting heart rate and sleep quality had actually improved in the suburbs. Hormonal cycles, tracked. Travel schedules, tracked. The correlation was undeniable. Every time her lifestyle quality increased, my access to the person I was providing that lifestyle for decreased. She walked in at 2:30 p.m. She was carrying 3 bags from a boutique in the village. I recognized the branding. Each of those bags represented roughly $400 in transitional wardrobe pieces for the new house. The movers are confirmed for Friday, she said, dropping the bags on the kitchen island. She didn't look at me. She was checking her reflection in the polished chrome of the espresso machine. We need to make sure the Range Rover is packed with the breakables. I don't trust the crew with the crystal. The movers aren't coming, I said. I stayed seated at the kitchen table. I had my laptop open. I didn't have a glass of scotch. I didn't have a cigar. I had a glass of water and a clear objective. She stopped. She turned. The way her eyebrows shifted wasn't about concern. It was the look of a manager dealing with a subordinate who had made a clerical error. What do you mean? I just spoke to them. I canceled the contract on the house, Sophia. The deal is dead. We aren't moving to Oak Ridge. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. I know because I was looking at the digital clock on the oven. Then the volume hit. It wasn't a conversation. It was a physical manifestation of perceived loss. She didn't ask why I canceled the house because she thought I'd lost my mind. She asked how I could do this to her. The social embarrassment of telling her friends, the loss of the walk-in closet, the dream she had built. "You promised," she shouted. "You said this was our fresh start. You know I can't get in the mood in this place anymore, Julian. It's stagnant. I told you, once we have the space, once I have my own wing for my projects, things will change. I'll be able to focus on us. You said that in 2021, I said. I turned the laptop screen toward her. What is this? This is the ROI of this relationship, I said. I pointed to the first tab, lifestyle upgrades versus physical engagement. I walked her through it. I kept my voice level, the same way I explain a quarterly burn rate to the board. June 2021, moved to townhouse. Cost, $850,000. Result, 40% decrease in intimacy within 90 days. January 2022, lease on the Range Rover Sport. Cost, $1,400 per month. Result, 2-week period of gratitude, followed by a return to the baseline of twice a month. June 2023, country club membership. Cost, $10,000 total. Result, frequency dropped to once a month. I scrolled down to the most recent data. For the last 90 days, we have had 0 physical contact. None. You've cited the stress of the upcoming move as the primary inhibitor. However, you've managed to spend an average of 6 hours a day on leisure activities. The math suggests that the new house variable would not result in an increase in intimacy. It would likely result in the total cessation of it, as you'd have 4,000 square feet to hide in. She wasn't looking at the numbers. She was looking at me like I was a stranger. You track this? You've been keeping a list of every time we... That's disgusting. That's sociopathic, Julian. It's auditing, I corrected. If I told you I was going to invest $1 million in a startup that had failed to meet every single one of its growth markers for 3 years, you'd call me an idiot. Why should I treat my private life with less rigor than my portfolio? You've been using intimacy as a carrot on a stick to leverage lifestyle upgrades. I've reached the point where I no longer care about the carrot, and I'm tired of the stick. She started to cry. It was the calculated kind, the one that usually precedes a negotiation. But I'd already closed the window for negotiation. I've already called the dealership, I said. The Range Rover lease is in my corporate name. I'm turning it in this afternoon. I've arranged a rental for you, a Honda Accord. It's paid for 30 days. That should give you enough time to find a permanent solution. You're kicking me out? Her voice went thin. I'm terminating a bad contract, I said. The townhouse is mine. I bought it before we were married. The prenuptial agreement covers the appreciation. I've already had your things packed into the guest room. The boxes are professional grade. Nothing will break. I stood up. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I didn't feel a weight lifting. I felt the quiet satisfaction of a balanced ledger. You can't just do this, she hissed. The tears were gone, replaced by the sharpness that always came out when the credit cards were at risk. I gave you 3 years of my life, and I paid for them, I said, at a premium rate. But the service was never delivered as advertised. I'm going to the office now. When I get back, I expect the keys to the Rover to be on this table. The Honda is parked at the end of the driveway. The gate code will be changed at midnight. I walked past her. I didn't look at the bags from the boutique. I didn't look at her face. I went to the garage, got into my car, and drove to work. I had a 4 p.m. meeting regarding a merger in the logistics sector. Those people understand that when the numbers don't work, you walk away. It's nothing personal. It's just how you stay in business. The office was quiet when I arrived. The HVAC system hummed at a frequency that usually helps me focus. I spent the first hour reviewing the Oak Ridge termination papers. Miller had done his job. The escrow agent had confirmed the wire transfer. I lost the $2,000 appraisal fee and the $500 inspection cost. Total sunk cost, $2,500. It was a bargain compared to the alternative, a 30-year commitment to a person who viewed my bank account as a vending machine that required a specific increasingly rare coin to operate. I checked my phone at 4:30 p.m. 14 missed calls, 22 texts. I didn't read the texts. The preview snippets were enough. How could you? You're a monster. My mother was right about you. Standard emotional debris. None of it addressed the data. None of it offered a counter-argument to the spreadsheet. That's the thing about people who live in narratives instead of numbers. They think the loudest voice wins the argument. They think if they can paint you as the villain, the math will somehow change to accommodate their feelings. But a 0% return is a 0% return, no matter how much you cry about the person calculating it. I call my sister, Claire. She's a corporate litigator in the city. She's the only one I trust to look at a situation without looking for the heart of it. It's done, I said when she picked up. The house and the girl. I pulled the plug this morning. Claire was silent for a moment. I could hear her typing in the background. Did you use the spreadsheet? I did. How'd she take it? She called me a sociopath. Then she tried the 3 years of my life angle. Classic, Claire said. Did you mention the Rover? It's being returned at 5 o'clock. I gave her the Honda for 30 days. I'm not a cruel man, Claire. I'm just an efficient one. Make sure you change the locks tonight, Julian. I've seen this before. She'll try to come back for sentimental items that just happen to have a high resale value. I'll send you a draft for a formal separation agreement by morning. Since you aren't legally married, it's mostly about the property and the shared debt, which is all in your name anyway. You're clean. Thanks, I said. And Julian, don't go to a bar. Go home, eat a steak, and look at your bank balance. You just saved yourself about $3 million over the next decade. I hung up and went to my meeting. The merger was with a firm called Vertex Logistics. They handled mid-sized freight in the tri-state area. Their CEO, a man named Henderson, was a gut-feeling guy. He liked to talk about synergy and company culture. I spent the entire meeting showing him why his culture was costing him 12% in overhead due to redundant middle management. You're a cold fish, Julian, Henderson said, leaning back in his leather chair. But you're right. The numbers are right. I just hate the idea of letting go of guys who have been with me for 10 years. If they were assets, they'd be producing, I told him. If they aren't producing, they're liabilities. You don't keep a leaking pipe in your house because you like the sound of the dripping. You fix it or you replace it. He signed a letter of intent. I left the office at 7 p.m. I drove past the dealership. The Range Rover was parked in the intake bay. The keys were likely in the drop box. I felt a slight tightening in my chest. Not grief, but the physical sensation of a successful transaction. The lease was terminated. The liability was off the books. When I pulled into my driveway at 8 p.m., the Honda was gone. The garage door opened, and I saw that her spot was empty. I walked into the house. It smelled like her perfume, something expensive and floral that she used to apply before we went to events where she needed to look the part of the successful wife. I went to the kitchen. The boutique bags were gone. The crystal she was so worried about was still in the cabinet. I checked the guest room. She'd taken about half of the boxes. She'd also taken the Dyson vacuum and a high-end blender I bought last Christmas. A petty tax for the exit. I decided not to pursue it. The cost of the blender was $600. The cost of an hour of Miller's time to get it back was $450. After taxes and the mental energy required, it was a wash. I let it go. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I went to the spreadsheet. I added a final row to the data set. October 24th. Contract terminated. Cost of exit, $2,500. Earnest money loss, plus $600. Blender. Total savings, infinite. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet. For the first time in 3 years, the silence didn't feel like a prelude to a request for money or a complaint about my schedule. It just felt like silence. I went to the fridge. I didn't have a steak, but I had the ingredients for an omelet. I cracked the eggs, whisked them, and poured them into the pan. The heat was consistent. The butter bubbled at exactly the right temperature. I didn't have to worry about if the smell of cooking was going to ruin the vibe, or if I was making too much noise while she was on a call with a client. I ate standing up at the counter. I looked out the window at the backyard, the sanctuary that was supposed to fix our lives. It was just a patch of grass. It required mowing every 2 weeks at a cost of $60 per visit. Tomorrow, I'd call the landscaping company and tell them to switch to a monthly maintenance schedule. I didn't need it to be perfect anymore. I just needed it to be managed. The phone rang. It was an unknown number. I didn't answer. I knew the area code. It was the village where her parents lived. She was there, setting the stage, telling them her version of the story. I'd be the villain in that story for the next 20 years. The man who cared more about numbers than love. The man who calculated his way out of a beautiful life. I didn't mind. Villains are just people who refuse to subsidize other people's fantasies. I washed the pan, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. I checked the locks on the front door. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. The bed was made. The pillows were straight. I lay down on my side of the bed. It felt exactly the same as it had for the last 3 years. Empty on the other side. Only now, I wasn't paying for the vacancy. The first month of the post-Sophia era was marked by a significant increase in my personal productivity. Without the requirement of date nights that functioned as performance reviews for my wallet, I found an extra 10 hours a week. I used those hours to audit my other recurring expenses. I cut 2 streaming services I never watched, downgraded my internet package to a more realistic speed for a single user, and canceled the wine club membership that Sophia had insisted on because the labels looked sophisticated in our rack. Total monthly savings, $840. On the 15th of the month, I received a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was a formal request for equitable distribution of assets acquired during the period of cohabitation. She wanted half the value of the townhouse's appreciation over the last 3 years, plus a lump sum for relocation expenses. I scanned the document and emailed it to Claire. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "She's dreaming," Claire said. The cohabitation agreement you had her sign before she moved in specifically waives any claim to real estate equity. And the relocation fee? You gave her a car for 30 days, and she took $1,800 worth of small appliances. She's already been relocated. I figured, I said, but I wanted to make sure there wasn't a loophole I missed. I'm not in the mood for a protracted legal battle. There is no battle, Julian. There's just noise. I'll send a response that cites the agreement and the inventory of items she removed from the premises. I'll also mention that if she pursues this, we'll countersue for the remaining balance on the Range Rover lease, which she technically abandoned by leaving the keys in the Dropbox without my signature. That usually shuts them up. "Do it," I said. I went back to my desk. I was working on a new project, a logistical overhaul for a medical supply chain. It was complex, involving cold storage requirements and strict delivery windows. It required total focus. The social fallout was a different matter. I started getting messages from our friends. "Is it true?" one asked. "Did you really show her a spreadsheet?" "I showed her the data," I replied. "Data doesn't have a bias." I was removed from 3 group chats within an hour. My social circle narrowed to 3 people: Claire, Miller, and my buddy Mark from college, who works in private equity and has been divorced twice. Mark called me that Friday night. "You're a legend, Jules. A cold-blooded, calculating legend." "I'm not a legend, Mark. I'm just a man who realized he was paying for a premium service and receiving the basic tier. Most guys just cheat or get bitter," Mark said. "You just audited her out of existence. How does it feel?" "It feels like a Sunday morning when you realize you don't have any errands to run. Quiet. Functional. You gonna get back out there?" "I know a girl at my firm. High earner, very low maintenance. She spends most of her time on a bike or in a boardroom. No, I said. I'm currently enjoying the lack of overhead. I've got a project that needs my attention, and the house is finally clean. I'm not looking to bring in a new variable yet. Fair enough. Just don't become a hermit. Even a guy like you needs a hobby that isn't Excel. My hobby is sleep, Mark. It's the highest ROI activity a human can engage in. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was 10:30 p.m. In the old regime, this was the time when Sophia would start talking about the things she wanted to change about the house or the trip she wanted to take. She had a way of turning the hour before sleep into a pitch meeting. Now, I just turned off the lights. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The Honda was gone. The neighbor's house was dark. Everything was in its proper place. 6 months later, I was in a coffee shop downtown, waiting for a meeting with a new vendor. I saw her. She was sitting at a table near the window with a man I didn't recognize. He looked like the type, expensive watch, hair that cost more than my weekly groceries, and a look of desperate eagerness as he listened to her talk. She looked the same, though she was wearing a different coat. I noticed she was carrying a bag from a boutique I didn't recognize. She was leaning in, her hand on his arm, telling him something that made him smile. I knew that smile. It was the smile of a man who thought he was winning. A man who thought he'd found something rare and special. A man who hadn't seen the spreadsheet yet. She saw me. For a split second, the mask slipped. The softness in her face vanished, replaced by the cold, sharp anger I'd seen the day I canceled the house. She looked at me with a pure, unadulterated hatred. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I just looked at her the way I look at a former business partner who I'd settled a lawsuit with. No malice, no regret, just an acknowledgement of a closed file. I checked my watch. My meeting was in 2 minutes. The vendor arrived, a woman named Sarah. She was sharp, dressed in a functional suit, and carrying a ruggedized laptop. We sat down at a table away from the window. I've reviewed the proposal, Julian, she said, opening her screen. The efficiency markers you set are aggressive, but achievable. I've broken down the cost per unit for the first 3 quarters. Let's see the numbers, I said. She turned the screen toward me. The data was clean. The logic was sound. The margins were healthy. This looks good, Sarah, I said. But I want to see a contingency plan for a 10% increase in fuel costs. If the market shifts, I don't want to be the one absorbing the loss. Already on page 4, she said. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, the kind that comes from finding someone who understands the rules of engagement. Across the room, Sophia was still talking. The man was still leaning in. He was about to make a very expensive mistake. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had a merger to finalize, a house that stayed clean, and a bank account that only went up. The ROI of my life was finally where it needed to be. Okay, I said, pointing to the screen. Let's talk about the logistics of the rollout. We got to work. It was efficient. It was productive. It was exactly what I wanted. The situation was finally under control.
Thanks for listening.